Coming up on Network Africa, Tembisa Hospital in Gauteng Province, South Africa temporarily closes after deadly shooting. The European Union lifts financial sanctions against Burundi, citing progress by the government. Plus, Tunisian judges begin countrywide protest against President Kais Said's move to dissolve the Supreme Judicial Council. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin in South Africa. A hospital has been temporarily shut down after a deadly shooting. Gauteng Health Authority said a nurse was shot dead at the Tembisa Hospital by her partner, a policeman, on Wednesday morning. The officer, who had driven to the facility in an official vehicle, then turned the gun on himself and is said to be in critical condition at the moment. In a statement by the Gauteng Department of Health, the incident had left patients and staff in shock. The hospital has now closed until further notice to allow police to do some investigation and also to allow for counseling of patients and staff. Our South Africa correspondent Brian Pugeni joins us now for more discussions. Hello, Brian. Talk to us more about what happened this morning at the Tembisa Hospital.
Good afternoon, Layo. Thank you for having me. Well, what we hear from the Gauteng government and the health department is that a police officer drove to the Tembisa hospital in a marked vehicle, in his police uniform, got to the hospital, called for the nurse in question, the victim, who is his partner. Then as she walked out, we hear shots rang out. That's when people started running, and after hearing the shots, and then after that, the police gentleman did turn the gun to himself. Unfortunately, the nurse did pass away, but the police officer is still in a critical condition. He's been taken to another hospital, so we're still waiting for details on that. So police are investigating what was the motive behind this, since these people are said to have been partners. But at the moment, Tembisa Hospital remains closed until further notice. The Gauteng Department of Health encouraging people to use nearby hospitals and clinics until the Tembisa Hospital has been open, as police continue their investigation.
Well, even as the police continue their investigation, it seems that, this is another case of gender-based violence. Or what are the police saying about this? Or how are South Africans also reacting?
Well, people are quite shocked. When the news broke today, everyone was really shocked to hear of such an incident. We've got a lot of cases of gender-based violence in the country, and these people are already scared, saying it's one of those where a partner just goes to his partner's workplace and shoots her and then turns the gun to himself. The circumstances behind that are not known. But of course, the outcry, even on social media, is that it could be an issue of gender-based violence. People asking themselves what really drove the police officer to go and shoot his partner. There's a huge outcry in the country, and gender-based violence has been an issue in the country for the past few years, and it's always been one of those things where the government, department, different organizations are trying to eradicate and put an end to, but it seems to continue, and this is a worrying concern for citizens at large, not just what happened today, but general citizens at large. It's a huge concern.
Well, just like you've said, we've had similar incidents, of somebody just picking up a gun and shooting his partner. And this seems to be on the rise in the country. What gun laws are there, in place to deter this? Or what is the government doing to actually stop this?
Well, the problem at the moment, the government says that there are so many illegal firearms in the market. We've seen a rise in these shootings. The police minister was in KwaZulu-Natal earlier this year after there were mass killings, mass shootings in that area. So he was also in that area trying to find out what exactly is the cause. Where do people really get these firearms? Because they seem to be in the market, they seem to be in high circulation. So government and the police as well, even the SNDF, the soldiers have been called at some point to go to hotspot areas where we've seen people getting shot randomly. Some people are saying they are hits. Some people are just saying it's random things happening in the country, which is still worrying for government. But the police department is, like everyone else, working really hard to find out what really is the cause and where do these guns really come from. But at the moment, there's no one thing where you can point to say the guns are coming from a certain area or they're coming from this place, because we've seen cases in Gauteng, your Western Cape, and in KwaZulu-Natal itself. But it's a really worrying factor for the South African Police Service.
All right then, Brian Pugeni, our correspondent in South Africa, thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Moving on to other stories, the presidential spokesperson in the Democratic Republic of Congo say investigators in the country have serious evidence that's pointing to actions against national security. In a statement read on state television on Tuesday night, Kasongo Mwema said such an attempt to destabilize democratic institutions would not be tolerated. Now, this follows the arrest on Saturday of Francois Beya, the special security advisor to President Felix Tshisekedi. It happened as the president was attending the African Union summit in Ethiopia, in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. The UN Human Rights Office says it is concerned by recurring incidents of deadly attacks on internally displaced people's camps by armed groups in the eastern region of the DRC. At a press conference in Geneva, OHCHR spokesperson Liz Trussell said following deadly attacks last week and further attempts over the weekend, there is now a significant risk that other IDP sites could be attacked as well. The UN Human Rights Office is therefore calling on the Democratic Republic of Congo's authorities to urgently strengthen the protection of civilians, including by ensuring the safety and security of IDPs.
We are extremely concerned by recurring incidents of deadly ethnically motivated attacks on internally displaced people's camps by armed groups in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. On the 1st of February, which was widely reported, at least 62 internally displaced people, members of the Hema ethnic community, were killed and 38 others injured by the Cooperative for the Development of Congo, that's CODECO. It's an armed group, and that was a nighttime attack on the Plaine Savo IDP camp. All the victims were either shot or attacked with machetes and knives. The Plaine Savo attack is only the latest in a string of devastating raids on IDP sites by CODECO in Ituri province, where ethnic tensions between the Hema and Lendu communities have existed for years. In 2021, we documented 10 attacks on 10 sites in Ituri, North Kivu and South Kivu, and that led to the deaths of some 106 people. And also some attacks of sexual violence.
Libya's interim Prime Minister Abdulhamid Al-Deiba has given a televised speech saying he would defy a planned vote in parliament to replace him on Thursday, and that's raising the prospect of two rival governments running in parallel. Deiba has repeatedly said the Transitional Government of National Unity GNU that he heads remains valid despite the collapse in December of a planned election process, and has rejected moves by the parliament to take control of it. At stake now is a UN-backed peace process, including a ceasefire that has held since summer of 2020, with rival armed forces mobilizing in Tripoli over recent weeks. The parliament, which has elected which was elected in 2014 and mostly sided with Eastern forces during the Civil War, has called the GNU invalid and on Monday adopted a new roadmap, including a new interim government before elections next year. A two-day protest has begun in Tunisia and is being held by the Judges Association in the country, who are calling for suspension of work in all courts all over the nation. Now, this is in protest against President Kais Saied's move to dissolve the Supreme Judicial Council. President Saied on Sunday said he is trying to rid the country of corruption and also to reset the 2011 revolution.
Tunisia's Judges Association called on Tuesday for a suspension of work in all courts countrywide to begin on February 9th and 10th in protest against President Kais Saied's move to dissolve the Supreme Judicial Council.
Today, the Tunisian Association of Judges launched a series of protests. This was supported by most of the judges' structures, and its goal is to confront President Kais Saied's attempt to seize the judiciary and for seizing all powers in Tunisia. It's a battle to defend what remains of Tunisian democracy and what remains of state institutions and the idea of the rule of law and its institutions.
President Kais Saied announced his declaration to abolish the Supreme Judicial Council on Sunday, February 6th, a move the body rejected as illegal and as an attempt to undermine judges' independence. He accused judges of loyalty to political factions and cited cases that have languished in the courts for years without verdicts. Critics have called Saied's almost total seizure of power a coup.
As for the decision of the President of the Republic, I see it as a necessary evil. Unfortunately, he waited for a long time. Then in the end, he made the painful decision. But the decision is right and in the right direction.
President Kais Saied vowed non-interference a day after he dissolved the council, accusing its members of bias and corruption. However, his move has been welcomed by some citizens. In the meantime, President Kais Saied continues to face growing pressure from judges, the United Nations and world powers after he scrapped the key judicial watchdog, triggering renewed accusations that he's moving towards authoritarian rule.
The European Union has said it is lifting its financial sanctions against Burundi. It's citing a peaceful political environment and progress by the Burundian government in several areas, including human rights and the voluntary return of refugees into the country. However, it notes that persistent challenges remain in the area of human rights, good governance, reconciliation, and the rule of law. Well, the lifting of sanctions by the EU follows a similar decision by the US last year. The sanctions were imposed in 2016 after then President Pierre Nkurunziza's decision to pursue a third term in office, which triggered deadly street protests. The U.S. has announced visa restrictions against current or former Somali officials that are accused of undermining democratic processes in the country. This comes as the U.S. pushes for credible elections in Somalia, which have been long delayed. U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken said this in a statement, that the visa restrictions apply to people who have failed to follow through with their obligations to implement timely and transparent elections. Somalia has posted elections since the mandate of President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, who's also known as Farmajo, expired in February last year. Indirect parliamentary elections started in November and they were supposed to conclude by December 24th, but have been marred by disputes. Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble and the regional state leaders reached a deal in January to be able to complete the polls by the 25th of February. Well, the U.S. State Department says the political leaders must follow through on their commitments to complete the process by the deadline. The sanctions follow last month's warning against further delays on the elections. Still to come on the program. Algerian blacksmith turns artist by recycling iron waste into captivating statues. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program. The Foreign Minister of Somalia's breakaway region, Somaliland, is pitching investment opportunities in his nation during a high-profile visit to Taiwan. Somaliland's Foreign Minister, Essa Kadi Mohammed, told Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen that his country has huge investment potential in untapped oil and gas reserves. Somaliland broke away from Somalia in 1991 but has not gained widespread international recognition for its independence. The region has been mostly peaceful with Somalia, while Somalia has grappled with 3 decades of civil war. Taiwan, on the other hand, claimed by China as its own territory and likewise diplomatically isolated, and Somaliland set up representative offices in each other's capitals back in 2020. While the meeting with the President Tsai, Somali Foreign Minister said they welcomed the giant Taiwanese companies to invest and trade with them.
In the mining sector, Somaliland has huge potential for foreign investment, including hydrocarbon deposits, oil and gas, as well as coal, which can be easily explored, and all coercive or threatening measures to deny such collaboration between international partners not only represent affronts to the principle, protocols, and norms on which the international order is based, but does little to promote the peace and security that the region and the world require.
Ghana says the Spanish company in charge of a lorry that last month exploded and killed 13 people violated storage and transport laws. Well, Maxam Co. has now been fined $6 million. The truck was transporting explosives owned by Maxam to a gold mine when it collided with a motorbike and blew up close to the town of Bogoso. The blast destroyed the village of Apatsie, injuring more than 100 people. The firm, however, denies the responsibility and is blaming a local contractor. Long after the conflict ends, people still suffer from the consequences of weapon contamination, mines and explosive remnants of war like unexploded bombs, shells and cluster munition bomblets continue to kill and maim people. But the United Nations Mine Action Service and the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator are now taking action in South Sudan to shine a light on the continuing effects of landmines in the country.
While tilling his piece of land 6 months ago, Simon Taguni struck something hard in the ground. It exploded and tore through his right hand. Unknown to him, this land contained an unknown explosive device located slightly away from where he lives. Simon is lucky to have escaped with his life.
When I was cultivating behind a tree, I hit something. Then I hit it again, and I thought it was a stone because there were a lot of stones around the tree. So I tried to remove the stone with my hand. Then there was an explosion.
Numerous farmlands across South Sudan, such as Tagunis, have previously been battlefields. A lot of them now lie abandoned and uncultivated. To shine a light on the continuing effect of landmines in South Sudan, officials from United Nations Mine Action Service, UNMAS, and Sarah Besolo Unyati, United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator, visited Gundokoro, an area in the outskirts of the capital, Juba.
We need for families to return to their areas where they live prior to the conflict. We need for agriculture to continue in areas where we know that we have the land, the water, and the people to be able to produce food to feed themselves and reduce food insecurity. Overall, it's about safety. It's about creating an enabling environment for people to be able to live and to thrive.
The visit highlights what the miners do on the ground in South Sudan. On the day of the visit, Mechanical and manual mine clearance teams showed a controlled explosion. The humanitarian coordinator highlighted the need for communities to help identify where mines and unexploded devices were laid during the conflict.
We need to end the war in every form, and with these under the ground, there's still the possibility that people can be attacked. That means the war isn't over. And for me, it's just about us making sure that every community is cleaned and every community is swept and there are no more mines in South Sudan, so that children can play, so that farmers can grow their crops and harvest, and so that South Sudan can develop community by community.
So one of the key messages we also wanted to echo on this day, and also in all the events and through all the communities across South Sudan, is if you see something, stop, don't touch, and report it to the national authorities or a community leader in your area who can get in contact. And unfortunately, statistically, children are they represent the highest casualty rates.
UNMAS and the National Mine Action Authority work every day to clear unexploded devices and mines. The risks that come with every rainy season where floodwaters transport unexploded devices are evident.
An Algerian blacksmith is changing the art world by making use of recycled iron waste to create innovative statue pieces. By doing this, he's also making the environment cleaner and safer. Let's take a look.
A statue of a gold and black horse stands tall on a platform in front of Algerian artist Walid Tribesh's workshop in Sétif. A closer look reveals that it is made up of nuts, bolts, and pieces of scrap metal. Working as a traditional blacksmith for 20 years, Tribesh decides to use his profession as a tool to create contemporary art by producing statues from recycled iron waste discarded by mechanics.
My beginnings were in ordinary technical blacksmithing. Over time, and considering that iron is an expensive material, I wanted to make pieces of art by recycling iron waste thrown by mechanics or others.
While initially Tribesh had few clients due to the novelty of his work, the 39-year-old artist says demand for his pieces grew enough for him to make a living out of it.
I make a living from this work, and there is good turnout, praise be to God. In the beginning, I had fewer clients because it was something new, but now there's strong demand.
Tribesh aspires to gain exposure abroad by participating in international art exhibitions.
Well, the UN Deputy Chief is expressing optimism about talks between the Ethiopian government and Tigrayan rebels. Amina Mohammed said this after returning from the war-torn regions of Tigray, Amhara and Afar. Well, Ms. Mohammed was accompanied on the trip by the African Union's mediator, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo. The UN's Deputy Secretary General was talking to journalists in the capital Addis Ababa at the end of her visit to Ethiopia, and she was in Ethiopia to attend the AU summit over the weekend. During her stay, she also met with authorities and the leadership of the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, which has been at war with the government forces for more than a year. Ms. Mohammed reiterated calls for a cessation of hostilities. That conflict has forced millions of people to flee their homes, and the UN says nearly 40% of people in Tigray are suffering from an extreme lack of food.
Ibrahim Mbaye se prépare. Monsieur Ibrahim Mbaye. Ibrahim Mbaye.
Well, Senegal has rewarded each member of the national football team with cash prizes and plots of land following their win at the Africa Cup of Nations. Each team member received more than $87,000 and plots in the capital Dakar and also in the neighboring Diamniadio city during a ceremony at the presidential palace. President Macky Sall also appointed the team to the Senegal's prestigious Order of the Lion, with fans cheering outside the gates. The president had earlier thanked the team for bringing pride and honor to the country. He also praised the team's coach, Aliou Cissé, which you see on your screen right now. Well, Senegal defeated Egypt 4-2 on penalties, becoming the tournament champions for the first time in their history. And that's it on the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.